Balki, welcome aboard to the show. Thank you so much for joining us today.
Thank you, Ari. I'm really excited. We connected via LinkedIn, and I'm excited to chat with you today.
So what was the moment, right? The earliest moment that you can remember in your childhood where you were like, I love engineering, I love software, hardware, whatever. What was that first memory for you?
Yeah, the first memory was probably when I was 5 or 6. I grew up in India, relatively lower middle class family. We didn't have a lot of toys or luxuries, but I figured out how to build uh, cars using matchboxes. And I have some very beautiful memories from that time. I My goal was to race cars back then. Uh, Building those matchbox cars was a means to an end, but building those cars was like got me into engineering, the mechanics of uh, the
So
laws,
who
etc.
who got you into this? I mean, was this just you on your own? And the internet, I'm going to assume that we're of similar age. The internet wasn't a thing when we were growing up, definitely
No,
not. So I'm assuming you're like in your mid 40s, something like that.
yep.
Um, how did you get into this? Was it books? Was it parents? Was it family? Was it an uncle? How did this happen?
I have to admit, I don't remember distinctly. It has got to be some neighbors or
Hmm.
somebody who I saw watch them do it and then just got fascinated and took it to the next level. So since then, anything that moves and has wheels has been my fascination.
I remember for me, it was standing behind my brother when he was basically running DOS commands.
Hmm.
And he wouldn't answer any of my questions. If I asked him a question, he barked at me to go away. So I just stood silently behind him, looking at what he was doing. That's how it started.
Very cool.
Um, so okay, so what happened? Like, what is it? I don't think I've ever heard about matchbox car racing. What exactly? Bring our audience with this and explain to us what that means.
Yeah, I mean, it was a way to find like joy in things that I could not afford, right? So I couldn't afford real cars or real toys, but this was a way to spend hours in my backyard in my summer playing with cars and visualizing a movie I watched. So like this this was so long ago that Indian movies, at least my regional language movies, didn't have cars.
Hmm.
If there was a car in the movie, that was like, oh my god, what is that thing? So even visualizing, imagining a car and building stories for hours together,
Mhm.
sometimes by myself, sometimes with my siblings or friends. That kept me happy for almost all summer long when I was at that age.
I love it. And this passion didn't stop at the age of 5 or 6. You went and you studied mechanical engineering, if I'm not mistaken.
Well, there is a twist there. Though. So when you talked about standing behind your brother,
Hmm.
that jogged my memories. A few years later, maybe I was 11 or 12 in my seventh grade, was my first introduction to computers. So
Hmm.
our school brought in like a half a dozen computers. Uh, this was like a very sacrosanct area. We got to like see the computers from the windows, but each student got maybe like 30 minutes in an entire week to actually touch and do something with them.
Hmm.
And the first time I went into that room, I can still smell the AC and the computers. It's probably toxic, the fumes from those computers, but I still have distinct memory of that smell. And I waited the remaining, 130 hours to spend that 30 minutes to go into that room and play with the computers. Um, I got started by just playing these games. The game I remember is Digger. I don't know if
Yeah,
you
I,
got to play
I
Digger.
do.
That was my first introduction to Digger, but it was like a gateway drug, of course. The teachers wanted me to learn some programming after playing with Digger. After the first few weeks, I got into the plain old DOS basic.
Yeah.
That's where I started to see the power, the almost the unlimited power of what you could do with programming as long as you don't get into infinite loops, and you had to unplug the computer to restart again. But that
So
was my first introduction.
these are the good old days where you can run out of memory, you can get the computer stuck, and you have to actually like push a hard. There was a reset button back in the day. People don't
Hmm.
know what that is nowadays. My computer doesn't have that anymore. And a turbo button. The kids won't know what that is.
Hmm.
But it was an interesting time.
Yeah.
What for you ignited that magic? What was the thing that you saw in your eyes vision that this has infinite potential?
Yeah, at that time, I don't remember even having a calculator.
Mm.
So this was such a leap of faith that I could send some instructions to the computer and it would spit out, you know, anything I wanted, like loops and if statements and things like that. Felt like magic to me at that point. And I have a funny story. So the next summer, I went on a hunger strike at my home to for my parents to buy me the computer. As a precious child, they bought me most things I asked for. They were apparently small compared to a computer. That was the first time they're like, okay, we don't mind if you die, but we can't afford a computer.
You'll when you're hungry enough, you'll eat. I gotta appreciate your tenacity and dedication. There, I don't know. There is something very rewarding, I think, and this is true for most developers that kind of get hooked. Something very rewarding about the ability to articulate language and for it to be followed and then to get that immediate feedback and to do wondrous things with it, right? Especially, I don't know if you did any computer gaming, to be able to, do math and have these beautiful things appear on the screen. To me, that was the moment where I was like, math equals computer games equals, plus programming. It was just amazing. So and it's hard to come back from that. So okay, so fast forward many years, you're okay, so you got hooked on computers and programming. Why mechanical engineering? Was that back to the passion for cars?
Not really. It's another twist in the story. So back in India, at least that time, getting into engineering was highly prestigious, highly competitive.
Mm.
So about 100,000 people would take the exam to join
Where's this
engineering.
IIT? Which one?
Just in my city, Hyderabad.
Uh-huh.
Yeah, so that was not even
Hyderabad, I'll
IIT.
mention for our audience, is a huge IT
Yep.
hub in India. In fact, I would say a huge amount of my friends, if they're in IT and they're senior executives, they're from Hyderabad. That's probably it's a good guess to have.
Yeah, yeah.
So it's the hotspot. I don't know if it's like that today, but it definitely has been over the years.
Yes. Yeah, it still is. Bangalore and Hyderabad compete for that first place. They have different flavors, but yeah, I enjoy going back home to Hyderabad. Um, where were we? So yeah, so getting into
Mechanical.
engineering
Yeah.
was not no small feat. So out of the 100,000, only about 5,000 would actually get into engineering, and even within that, if you had to get into a, a free program, that would be like only the top 500 folks would get into the free program.
Yeah,
But
so
long
that's
story
that's
short,
point just to help our audience, right?
yeah,
So that's if I'm doing my math correctly, that's 0.5%.
yes, to get free or subsidized education. Within that, only the top 100 would be able to get any field they want, but 100 to 500, you had to compromise. So that's where the mechanical comes in.
Mm.
It was not my first choice. I really
well,
wanted
what
to do
was what was the first choice? CS.
computer science.
Yeah, fair
Yes.
enough.
Yeah,
Fair
that
enough.
was like the top 120 students could get in.
But there's
I
there is there is a magic in mechanical engineering. Did you kind of fall in love with it, or was it a love-hate relationship?
uh, I'll admit it here first. It was a love-hate
Okay,
relationship.
fair
I
enough.
joined the mechanical engineering program, but I
Mm.
vowed to myself, like the first day I graduate, I'll do something with software and computer. Everybody else in my class made fun of me. It was still, even back then, it was still a mystery, computer science,
Mm.
if you can
Yes,
imagine. Late
yes,
90s
yes, yes.
was not that popular. It was not a
No,
field to go after.
no. No, in fact, my dad at that time, I was running a BBS with my brother. For our younger audiences, a BBS was basically the first website ever, but you would dial up with a phone to
Hmm.
another computer running a service, and it's called the bulletin something system, bulletin board system. And you basically your phone did these weird noises, and then one person, right? It wasn't the internet. One person dialed to your phone number, connected to your computer. That's what I was doing in the 90s. And we didn't have the internet, right? We had these like dial-up stuff, which was 2400 bps, and that it was awful. It was just awful. You can't even imagine how bad it was. But we were in love.
Yes.
So what was the stuff that you took away from mechanical engineering that in retrospect, not at the time, but 10 years later, today, that you're like, okay, I got a lot of value from mechanical engineering? What was the things you kind of enjoy in retrospect?
Ooh, that's a tough one. But it still goes back to software. So
Mm,
my final year, we did a project, an AutoCAD project as a team. Um, yeah, and I had really good memories of the practical implications of not just learning to code, but be able to put that into practice. That was my first exposure to be able to do that. And again, I was even more deeper into love, like being the somewhat of a superhuman in my class of 60. No one cared or wanted to do anything with software, so I was the one like furiously typing all of their programs
mm.
at the last minute. So you know, I don't know. I'm not like putting mechanical engineering in a great limelight here,
Look,
but I didn't enjoy it.
there's no right answers, but there's a passion. I remember at that age, I was building model airplanes out of balsa.
Hmm.
And I don't know, there was something magical about learning the physics and the physical engineering of it, that to date I'm obviously big into software, but there's a magic in the physical products and hardware, whether it's a model airplane, or a drone, basically, right? Same thing, more or less.
Awesome.
um, Okay, so fast forward a lot of years. This fire was lit and never blew out, and now you're in the software industry. You testify that you either enjoy or have just so happened to find yourself coming into complete messes. And to quote you, you call it utter chaos. What is what does utter chaos look like in a software engineering DevOps environment?
Yeah, so multiple instances, either with people, process, product, technology, right? So one thing
So
that
hold on, before we go down the five M's, right?
Mhm.
Let's talk about the feeling. What is happening? Are people shouting at each other? Is shit breaking? Our customer, like, what is the sense of the emotion that you get when you walk into this chaos? What does it feel and look like without the technical buzz,
For me personally,
for you and for the people around you?
yeah, I think different people take it differently. For me, early on when I started my career, at least in the US, I had this pseudo mentor that
Mm,
I was able to follow. And I was amazed by how calm he would be in these situations, right? So that
yeah,
this was almost 20 years ago, but it's still like fresh in my memory. Whether it's technical, whether it's like people related issue, he would always be calm. So that's my role model. I don't even think he knows he's my role model, but it's like I got to see him firsthand, and I practiced that for somehow that stuck in my mind. Peace and calm is the way out of this chaos. And it worked every single time, right?
yeah.
Um, so yeah, for
What's
me at
happening
least.
around you though? So you're mastering kind of the zen of moving forward, but what does it look around you?
Yeah, I mean, it's a combination of some people that just giving up. So that's
Mm,
the normal persona, right? So like early on, people like, I don't know what's happening, count me out of it. That's like somebody chickening out. And most early stage folks are people who can't take stress. That's what happens. there is these hyper active out external processors that are yelling or screaming or like blaming even that early in the game, like why did this happen, focusing on
Yeah.
the mechanics and blame
Right.
versus the solution.
Okay. So
So those are
let
the
me
different
let me paint
personas.
the picture, right? You've got this, I mean, I don't think the rest of the world knows the soap opera, which is extreme engineering, right?
Mhm.
So it's the crunch time, right? You need to get the version out. Customers are waiting. They're unhappy. Sales is unhappy. The CEO is sitting in the room waiting for you to get it right. And then there's a very awkward meeting where the CEO or somebody important comes into the room, and one engineer is depressed and is not talking. Another engineer is mumbling to themselves angrily, and another engineer is fuming at the mouth and about to leave the room. Does that sound about right?
Yeah, the situation slightly, if you can even paint the picture. I spent my first 4 years or so in high stakes technical support organization. So we were
Mm.
supporting banks, and they
Yeah,
would something would go wrong in the middle of the night. We had a plan on how to address it,
yeah.
and this would happen in the hallways with like 10, 15 people gathered around computers or a meeting room in the middle of the night.
Okay, so the crisis happened.
Mhm.
Now you're 20, 40 hours into working it. Everybody is exhausted. People are at their end of their wire. They don't yet see the end. How do you navigate that situation, right? People are exhausted, people are tired, you need to get it done. High stakes, right? Money, life, healthcare. There's different scenarios where this happens. Even manufacturing, right? You show those lines don't work, it's millions of dollars a day. Um, how do you navigate management of the team and everybody in their different kind of corner of the spectrum? What do you do to bring people together despite the situation?
Yeah, I have to dig back into one of those memories, but um, understanding that there are humans involved, right? So again, I've seen various spectrum of people. Some people can go on for days without resting, or honestly, I'm not one of them, at least not now. So I need a break to do these things. So in those high stakes situations, at least I had the small luxury of multiple people being able
Yeah,
to help, thinking of the succession planning, like if somebody has to go take their break, how do they hand off
yeah,
um, during those, the longest I remember is maybe 2.5 days where we could not resolve it. um, Communication, that's where I learned communication, both internal and external, is quite critical. When engineers are heads down in the solution mode, either because of ego or because they want to be focused, they don't lift their head up and report out. So that
yeah,
was my first experience of reporting out is even more important than resolution. So
yeah.
that gives runway towards like, okay, we haven't solved this problem yet, but we
Right,
have eliminated these three things, so we have
right.
5 more paths to follow through. So that's a huge thing both for internal as well as external stakeholders.
So an incredibly important aspect here that you're talking about is actually most of the problem is solved before the problem even happens,
Yep.
and really the core of that is planning towards being able to work well as a team. And one of the elements that go into that is the communication patterns that you have. Another element is even the ability to hand over. So engineers know this, but the general population doesn't necessarily know this. If you're the only engineer who knows the code, there's no way in hell a different engineer can walk into that. It's just not possible. It's almost like learning a new language. So having code reviews, having communication happening on early, having these overlaps of knowledge, that can actually create the ability for engineers to communicate well and collaborate in an environment of chaos. Having these design architecture reviews, having an architecture written down that you can pull up and say, okay, let's map out where the issues are and what the pipeline could look like of where the failure could be, and then map out what are all the alternatives to a solution or to finding the problem. These things happen way in advance of the, hopefully, of the problem. But if you have it all set up right, you can rock through it beautifully. It's still difficult, it's still tension, you still need to do a lot of work, but it's a whole different ball game. So I mean, you're kind of hinting and kind of alluding to these things, but I wanted to just put it out. These practices that you're describing, incredibly, incredibly important. I wanna touch on I think one of the biggest issues that I see. An issue happens, and every engineer comes up with, oh, this is the problem, but nobody stops necessarily and says, okay, let's map out the whole pipeline end to end, client to server, whatever, and map out every single problem that can happen through the pipeline and then do divide and conquer analysis. They just go and start researching a specific problem. Have you seen that happen in your interactions? And how do you navigate that in real time?
Yeah, I was about to go there. So this role model of mine, that was his other attribute, which is stay calm and then map out these things, right? Where the touch points, where there's fragility in the system,
Yeah.
and noting those and sharing that so we could methodically go through this, look at these logs, look at back then, like we didn't have any sophisticated observability like
Yeah.
today. No telemetry, no, it was all like hard coded through ugly log files.
Yeah.
Oh, that those log files give me nightmares right now. All text files, or if you were had the luxury, they would be in some database where you could do some filters. But they were still like traces and evidence splattered across the system. Somehow he would magically know, or like I think it's more about the framework, the mindset of let's take it step by step, almost
Right.
like you said, started with the beginning um, in mind. So like map it out and see the logs, examine the logs at each of those points, and then we didn't hesitate to add additional logs, right?
Yeah,
Okay,
absolutely.
we think it could be here, but we don't have the evidence. So have the courage to real time add a log statement and deploy it to production with millions of customers.
You use that word evidence. I mean, this is a game of forensics, right? You're
Hmm.
looking for evidence. You're looking for what leads to what. You're coming up with a hypothesis of what might be the issue, and then you try to prove it out by adding log statements. Like it truly is a CSI basically. Um, so I have a question to you. Do you see kind of the younger engineers coming out with these skills, or this skill that you're talking about, the CSI, to look through complex architectures, complex code, right? Is this a missing skill, or people kind of have it nailed down from your perspective?
Well, the tooling is more advanced now, but it's a double-edged sword, right? So at one of the companies, we're implementing open telemetry. It's pretty sophisticated with Sentry and Grafana, all the alerting, et cetera, et cetera. It's pretty sophisticated, but the systems are also more complex than
Yeah.
before. Back then, it was like client server, maybe one broker in the middle, but now it's like a gazillion services and microservices splattered all across the internet, multi-cloud, third-party services, etc. So uh, this is my hypothesis. In my experience, it's still been like more of an art than a science, unfortunately. Some people just like they would be in the company for a month and somehow they become the sage and like somehow can say, oh, I think that's the problem.
Mm.
I've studied a few of those
And
people,
it's the
and
same person consistently getting the right answers.
yeah, yeah,
How? Why? What is the skill? No, because this is so important, right? How
yeah.
all the managers are now, their ears are perking up and they're like, how do I find those type of people to hire them?
Yeah,
What's the persona? What's the profile?
I have a list of those people you have to reach out to.
For a fee, for a
Yes,
fee.
of course, yes. Yeah, but interestingly, these people are also the ones that are, for a lack of better term, are on the like they're not a regular programmer, right? So they have their kings, personality kings.
We'll get to that in
So
a second. Hold on. Hold on.
Yes.
We'll talk about the good, the bad, and the ugly. Let's stay on the good
Of
right
this.
now.
Yes.
So,
So,
what if you are now, let's talk about hiring, okay? You're
mhm.
looking for these people that can figure shit out and fast. Is there any characteristic or is there anything that you can test for? Because this isn't a skill that's easy to test. You can't be like, oh, do you know? Explain to me polymorphism. That won't tell you if this person is a super mastermind in debugging architectures and flows, and you just can't test for that so easily. How do you? What is there any proxy to which you can say, oh, if they can do this, they can do that? Or is it just you get lucky and you fire the people who can't do the job? I mean, that's an answer too.
Yeah. I mean, luckily these days, if like 10-20% of the team it has this natural ability, I think we can get by.
Hmm.
In terms of testing, I've been experimenting with interviews. So two things I do early on, like I have specific sets of questions
Hmm.
about the breadth and depth of their knowledge. So I have
Hmm.
a set of questions that give me pretty good signals. And then we're experimenting with what I've narrowed down to is instead of building something from scratch, from a requirement, or even a lead code type. I hate lead code type of exams, by the way. So I've never done those. Not allow that in my companies. What we have done successfully is take some piece of code, intentionally
Break it.
break it,
Yeah.
and then put it in front of them. And
Okay.
I've developed
Brilliant.
a, a rubric. And to your point, I have at least 20 to 50% of it is how they react to this
Fix
broken
this
code.
shit. It
Yeah.
don't work.
Yeah.
I mean, okay. That's what I do too.
Mhm.
This is highly uncommon. I gotta tell you, Balki, I don't see a lot of people doing this. In fact, my tests were so complicated that more than 90% of the people failed.
Oh, wow.
Yeah. So we were doing reverse engineering basically for forensics, and the work we had to do was so difficult that I built these kind of break it, try to fix it, and I had basically everybody fail, and I didn't do an interview. I just had a 5-minute call, and I said, come do the test. If they passed the test, they were 90% there, right? Because everybody else is going to fail the test. And in fact, I had this one test where I was developing a driver, right? And drivers are tricky because if you mess up, you get a blue screen, your computer's dead, restart the computer, like it's a mess. And I worked on an issue for, I think it was 3 weeks. I had to bring the CEO in, and together, he was really technical, even though he was the CEO. Together, we figured out the issue with the driver, and I was like, oh my God, that's brilliant. I saved the code with the bug. This is now my test. And I gave people as much time as they needed. And remember, this took me weeks, right? And I'm always looking to hire people that are better than me, not worse than me.
Mhm.
Um, I must have interviewed for that role 30 people,
Wow.
and one person got it. And then this is a funny story. So I'm like, you're hired. And then it turns out that she was the girlfriend of somebody who worked in the company.
Hmm.
So I basically give her an offer, and then the boyfriend comes to me and says, "Oh, by the way, like we're." So I was like, "Look, it's totally fine. You need to report this to HR, but it's not a good idea for two people to work in the same company, also for safety and kind of diversification, but also for politics. And like, I wouldn't do this if I were you. Your girlfriend is one of the smartest people I've seen. Like, she'll find a job easy. I don't know if you want to make this decision. It's your decision."
Hmm.
So she ended up not working for us, but
Wow.
absolutely brilliant, right? What
Hmm.
took me weeks, she did in almost 5 hours. Um, so yeah, I absolutely love your strategy. It's what I've done as well.
Part of the strategy is also how they react and how they
Okay. Oh,
approach, right? So
okay.
that
Talk
there's a
talk to me about
mindset
this.
too.
This is true. What is
Yeah.
what's the spectrum look like in, because you're not really measuring binary success or failure. You're
Exactly.
looking
It's
at
a
how they
spectrum.
think through the process of solving the problem. So tell me
Exactly.
about that. What do you see? What's the spectrum, and what's good? What's bad?
Yeah, by the way, I have a post on LinkedIn about this rubric. I've shared it, but there's like 10 different elements we measure on a 5 scale, right? So uh, anything from do they get to the solution in the given time?
Yes.
Um,
Hold on, hold on.
do,
The given time. Why is that important? So
Uh,
does it matter if it takes them 2 hours or half an hour or 10 minutes to get to the solution?
oh, no, they'll have like something like an hour, right?
Right.
So do they get some part of it working? So it's
Mm,
completely broken.
mm,
Are they fixated on perfection,
mm,
or are they fixated on like getting some of the program working?
mm.
So that's important to me because I'm usually helping high stakes B2B SaaS companies. So perfection is not as important
It's making
as
progress.
exactly, yeah. So, and how they, the other thing is, you know, every company I help is predominantly anchored on teamwork.
Mm,
So there are projects people work independently, but most projects are team collaboration, which means are they collaborating with the team on our
mm,
side, the hiring team? Are
mm,
they like heads down, just like slinging code, or are they like raising their head and
mm.
conversing with the people? Like that's more on the soft skill side.
Right.
Um, Things like, you know, do they see if there are any unit tests? If there is no unit test, will they add them?
Yeah.
If there are unit tests, do they test, verify if they are working? So it's a more holistic way of measuring
Yeah.
their more of the mindset. We
Yeah.
have, unfortunately, like in to your example, somebody solved the issue in 15 minutes, but they never talked. It was just through
Mm,
magic or whatnot.
yeah.
We said, like, we didn't say no directly, but we doubled down and measured
Right.
the interpersonal
So
elements of
this
this.
is a tricky thing, right?
Mhm.
So there are different types of software and problems that you can hire that person and you would hire 10 of them and you don't care that they're not talking to each other because you need that kind of brilliance.
Mhm.
But there's enough fragmentation in the software that you don't actually care. You don't need them because you're just doing like a moving line. And that's what I
Mhm.
had in a previous company, right? You just had to take a phone, connect to the reverse engineering, the binary protocol, like reading the matrix. You don't really need to talk to anybody. You just need to get your work done.
Mhm.
The problem is that when you talk about these kind of like ERP systems, they're so complicated and need so much communication. There's no way you can hire an engineer that doesn't communicate well. So I would
Exactly.
argue that you can definitely hire that person, but it depends on what's the software you're building.
Exactly. Yeah. And just to give an example with the Gen AI, many of the companies I'm helping, we do lots of prototypes more than ever. And there may be an endless stream of work for that type of person. In
Yeah,
fact, we are
that's right.
entertaining that persona who's full stack, may not have the best social skills in the world, with
Yeah,
eyes wide open. Like you come in, your job is
exactly.
to spit out these prototypes, and it works
Do your
great.
magic. Don't talk to anybody. I mean, I'm giving these people shit, but believe it or not, that was me 25, 30 years ago. Um, Garbage social skills. Yeah, like absolutely nothing. I've
Yeah,
grown a
that's my
little bit,
newfound
but
love, though. Like at one point, I would be like, "Do not show me your face." But the world makes us better, right? When the world
this is
changes, we
true.
have to change with it.
This
There's
is
a
true.
place, and there's a great place for these folks. I think
Yes.
I would love to talk to such folks.
Yeah. I had a lot of them, so I'll give you my list. I'll tell you, I hired them. I was looking for them because
Hmm.
here's the thing, right? You know this. A good developer, compared to a bad developer, the bad developer will destroy your life, your willingness to live, your company, your code base. You will never come out of it. An okay developer compared to one of these people, right? These great developers, these special minds, they're not 30% better. They're 5 to 10x better, meaning they can do the
Hmm.
job of 3 to 10 people. Now
Yes.
that just conceptually, that is crazy. It's like, okay, so you pay them, let's say you pay them another 30%, right? So for every $100, you pay them another $30. That's a huge bump in salary. Yet totally worth it on an economic standpoint, right? Totally
Hmm.
worth it. Um, okay, so so let's talk about the ugly. We talked about the good, some of the bad. Let's talk about the ugly. Um, these anti-social, brilliant people. What are the tips and tricks to manage them? What's the worst nightmare situation you were in with one of your engineers? Brilliant, amazing, but you wanted to pull your hairs out. What did that look like?
Yeah. The worst kinds, at least in like a medium-sized companies, when they go just insult people that they don't know, right? Like somebody in the stakeholders would say, you have no clue how complex this is, even though it's a subtle insult, like
Right.
saying that out loud, especially in a group setting, um, like erodes my credibility, right? So my,
Hmm.
not by my, I mean like the engineering's credibility
The group,
in
yeah.
front of the entire company. So building that is expensive. um, so that's one type. The other persona is the team members, either out of jealousy or out of like their bad bedside manners, they
Mm-hmm.
just don't want to work with them, like even though they're such a great um, technical person to be around that they could learn from. There's a tipping point where they help me a lot, but I lose my patience, and it's hurting my ego, so I don't want to work with them. So that's the other negative impact of it. But in terms of helping them, the two
Is
main
there a way
things.
to manage this? So ego is a huge part, right? I would call it almost likability, right? Like
Mhm.
they're brilliant, but you grinding your teeth when you're walking with them. Is there a way to manage this to the degree that you can actually help them increase their skills to the level that these problems are somewhat or diminished?
Yeah. So one specific example is this: many times somehow they're also attached, they have super high integrity,
Yeah,
and in startups especially, you have to make compromises, right?
yeah,
So they do not take that well. Like we are adding
yeah,
tech debt, and
yeah,
they're literally in tears when they see like we have to stop everything and reduce or remove this tech debt. And it's not practical in a startup. We intentionally build this tech debt, or
yeah.
we make a small compromise in like the security stance or whatnot. I mean, those things really, really uh, like make these people angry and upset, and it's a hit to their integrity. So one trick I learned is I'll take on the risk, like declare. In one extreme scenario, I had
Don't
to
worry
bring the
about it.
CEO. Yeah, bring
Yeah.
the CEO, and CEO had to write a letter and say, I understand this risk. If something happens because we're not fixing it, it's on me. It will
Yeah.
never be on you or your integrity. And that worked. The-
Why? I noticed this pattern too,
Mhm.
that these incredible engineers have incredibly high integrity. Um, why is there that link? Have you ever figured that out? Because it seems to be a pattern.
I'm not a psychologist. All I know is there's a link. There's a pattern.
Hey, I'll take it. I'll take your
Yes.
agreement. I
Yeah.
wonder, I wonder about that because I see it again and again and again. And the integrity is beyond, it's also on the level of like doing the right thing and being honest.
Hmm.
There might not be they might not be nice people, but
Hmm.
honesty is such a high value.
Yes.
Um, so it's like I said exactly that. And if I made a mistake or I said something wrong, they're ashamed to their core and
Yep.
they will admit it. As if like some terror, nobody else cares, but they are like almost in tears, right? Because
Hmm.
they made this um, interesting.
Yeah.
Um,
One other tip I'll share is giving them real time feedback.
mm,
So I used to wait, like as a young first time manager, I'm like, okay, maybe it'll fix itself.
mm,
And
mm,
absolutely will never fix
absolutely
itself.
not.
So I used to wait till the next one on one. Then I moved to slacking or sending them a message right after something I know or noticed. I took it to one level extreme, which is in the meeting. I made an agreement with those folks. When you slip up and lose your like tongue, I'm going to stop you right there. I'm your accountability partner.
That's dangerous because you're doing it in front of other people. How did that
Yeah,
work
but I made
out?
an agreement before. Like
Okay,
I would
so there was
talk to
like a
them.
cultural agreement with everyone that we're going to grow together.
Mhm.
That's so
Especially
interesting.
with individuals, right? So not
Yeah,
everybody would do this,
yeah,
but these folks generally tend to, like in the heat of the
yeah,
moment, forget what they agreed
yeah.
to.
So
So
they had to opt in basically to this culture.
exactly, yeah, yes,
Wow.
and most of
I
them opted in.
Oh wow, I've never
Yeah,
done anything like that. That is so
yeah.
interesting. That's
It
that's
works. It works. I've done it 3 times. It works.
oh wow.
Yeah. And many times I'll first offer, like, if I have enough connection with
Mm,
them, I could be the accountability partner,
mm,
or they could choose somebody they trust.
mm,
So it's a 50-50 for me. They'll be like, if there's layers between me and them, they may
mm.
not be comfortable me
Yeah.
being there. Like, I'm already 2 layers above
Mm,
me saying something in front of the group
yeah.
versus
It's the
somebody else.
boss's boss. Yeah.
Yeah. So that
So is there?
accountability helps a lot.
Do you see that accountability partner, that near real time or real time, does that feedback create growth?
Um, I This is the downside of it. Like, 75% of the times when we had folks like this, it's temporary. It helps the company, it
Mm,
helps get past that. And it may even in the short to medium term, they may realize. But just because it's so deep inside them,
mm,
startups and fast moving companies are not the right fit.
mm,
Reflecting on all the people that I encountered, I can count them on my fingertips. They're happier in larger settings
mm,
where there's built-in safety, and it just works better for them. Where, one, they have a narrower scope, they're in this echo chamber where as long as they can make it perfect, they can happily live, right?
mm.
Startups where they have higher influence and there are more room for mistakes and failure, they struggle. So long story short, I tried to keep them and keep them happy and productive, but eventually their happy path is to go to a different setting altogether.
Yeah, there's something interesting, right? I mean, you can move the needle. It does help, but the question is, does it fit kind of the personality, and is everybody happy, even with the immense efforts into kind of keeping everybody in the same ship rowing in the right direction? Balki, what an absolute delight. We got to go into some really deep and I think really important topics today. We have only one question, which is, and we're over time because this was so much fun. Um, we have only one question that is scripted in this show. If you had to go back to one of the hardest moments in your life, what would be the advice that you would give to yourself?
It's an interesting question. I'm at that age group and stage in my life that I reflect a lot. So maybe I'll answer it as 20 or 25 years ago, what I would advise myself. The keyword for me is intentional balance, right? So I
Mm,
focus so much on my career at pretty much expense of everything else,
mm,
health and family and relationships. It was the right thing for certain time period, but not this long, right? So that's what I tell my kids or younger folks. You can make those sacrifices, be focused on your career, but eyes wide open. Things like family and relationships, almost impossible to repair once you have gone past a certain
yes.
threshold. Money, even health, you could recover with some extreme measures,
Yeah.
but relationships are extremely hard to patch up. It takes 10 times the effort once they're on the downhill. So that's what I would tell. Like, you can focus on any aspect of your categories that I say, like health, wealth, career, family, relationships, everything, but be intentional. Like, when you're young, you could make sacrifices. As you grow up, you have to be more intentional.
Okay. Thank you so much for coming on the show. This has been an absolute delight.
Thank you, Ari.